we are witnessing a new international financial order in the making. Whether we like it or not, there is a new financial order that is being developed as an alternative to the dollar-euro dominated international financial order, mainly because of what Regis said, which is the abuse of the current system by the United States and its allies. Thirdly, allow me to observe that you cannot separate money from war. The two are interlinked because the most profitable business in the world is a war. What are the implications for the United States if I now go back to your question? Firstly, there is going to be inflation at home. Inflation is going to visit the United States of America. Secondly, the United States is now going to fight in many fronts because remember, there is already a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies as an alternative to the US dollar hegemony. So now it is going to be fighting on two fronts.
Welcome to Token Topics. I hope everyone out there is doing great, staying safe and healthy. XRP and a new financial order is the topic of this video. We're going to dive into some latest news and also what's going on with the BRICS nations, and I'm going to connect some dots to prove that XRP will be vital in this new financial order. I'm also going to play a clip from a very interesting video from SABC News on the hegemony of the US dollar, the BRICS nations, and a new monetary system at hand. I believe it's safe to say and certain that the US dollar will be collapsing soon, and many countries are already planning on it. Before I dive in, remember I'm not a financial advisor. Invest at your own risk. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. Remember to keep your crypto safe with a DCENT biometric wallet. It's what I use to keep my crypto safe and off the exchanges. What talks about cyber attacks, exchanges going bankrupt. Why would you want to gamble with your crypto? It's imperative to keep it off the exchanges and onto a hardware wallet. I'm going to put the affiliate links in the description below so you can receive a special Token Topics discount. First topic on the list, Ripple is considering buying bankrupt crypto lender Celsius. States here that Ripple is actively seeking to scale the company through merger and acquisition deals, a spokesperson told Reuters. Ripple Labs, a blockchain payments company behind XRP, may be interested in purchasing assets belonging to the insolvent crypto lending company Celsius. I'm going to put the link to that article down below so you can read it. That is pretty impressive that Ripple, even in the face of an SEC lawsuit, it just shows that nothing's stopping them. To purchase a bankrupt company shows their strength, and the world is seeing that. As I've heard many people say, and I agree, that Ripple is no ordinary company. They're not. This is excellent news. Next topic is a new Ripple report reveals that 76% of financial institutions are expected to use crypto by 2025. And if you've been subscribed to the channel, I've been talking about that year. That's a special year. 2025, we're going to see an explosion of crypto assets being used. Even before then, but really 2025, we're going to see the price of XRP. It's going to astonish people. Continues at a new report by Ripple looking at what percentage of financial institutions are interested in using blockchain for payments. They've discovered that more than 3/4 of them plan to use crypto by 2025. And once again, I'm going to put that article down below so you can read through it. That's information that anybody could read through. I just like to go through the good content so my listeners and viewers are in the know. So let's go ahead to the next topic now. Now I want to play this clip from SABC News, and it's an excellent video and how they break it down with the monetary system, what's going on with BRICS, the hegemony of the US dollar, and basically the petrodollars dying right before us, before our very eyes. We're seeing a new monetary system come into place. So go ahead, get comfortable, sit back. I'm going to play this clip and enjoy. Actually, before I play that, I want to play this clip from the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink. And to break it down, we don't have to have just one world reserve currency. We could actually have many of them as a basket of currencies.
I started with the foundation. There is a great need for digitization of currency. There is no need for hard currency anymore. And then whether that is the hegemony of the dollar or the hegemony of three different vehicles, we'll see how the market all plays out. I mean, some of the suggestions that you just brought up is more political, and I'm trying to focus on the social need of why we need digital currency.
So as you just heard from Larry Fink, he just stated whether that vehicle would be the dollar or the hegemony of 3 different vehicles as a world's reserve. But here's the main thing, interoperability.
Very large believer of a stable coin type of currency, not a Bitcoin, a stable coin that is based on a currency, or each country or a country creates a digitization of that.
You could have a basket of currencies, right?
Or you could create, that would be a fantastic vehicle, a basket of a world currency.
And as he just stated, a fantastic idea would be a basket of a world currency. It doesn't matter what the currency is, though. It's the interoperability. We know what Ripple's XRP was designed to do. You can convert it from one currency into XRP into another currency in 3 seconds. That's the power of XRP. And just as Larry Fink said, it's going to be interesting how the market plays out. We know that there's going to be all kinds of craziness that's going on in the world right now. But in the end, we're going to see the clarity. We're going to get clarity, and we are going to see a new financial order. We are. The BRICS nations are very serious with what they're doing. They're not playing games. We need a level playing field. The world needs a level playing field. Now, I'm going to play that video in just a moment, but I want to actually connect some dots here, because there's a lot of people that might say, well, you know, the BRICS nations, they might not even use XRP. Oh, well, let's go ahead and look at these facts here. We know that Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey are considering joining the BRICS nations, which is very huge and very world impacting right there. Well, it's always good to refresh our memories. Look at this here. This is an older article, but I'm connecting dots here. Saudi Arabia's central bank agrees Ripple blockchain deal. Let's not forget about Egypt, too. Egypt's largest bank joins Ripple network for cross-border payments. Another massive deal. And Egypt is in the top 5 nations globally in terms of remittance flows. Huge deal. That is another country that is deciding whether or not to go to BRICS. Let's connect some more dots. The largest bank in Africa and the Middle East joins Ripple network for cross-border payments. Boom. And we have another major Middle East country, Iran. They applied to join China and Russia in the BRICS club. I also want to show this article. Cash is trash, says the Bank of England. They know what's coming. We know what's coming. Now, if anybody says that Russia will never use XRP, especially if they create their own blockchain, I don't believe that's fully true. But here's the thing, is that Ripple cannot be a company like Swift. They cannot weaponize it. The whole idea was to have decentralization. And I came across this article, and it's very interesting. It shows both sides. We know that the Russian central bank, they actually tested Ripple in the past as a cross-border payment alternative. But here's the thing. It's hard to believe that they would select a U.S. company as an alternative to SWIFT in the current situation. So that's the downfall. But there's a positive case to that, is because Ripple is not SWIFT. And the whole idea was to create a level playing field and the decentralization. So there would have to be some kind of agreement that they cannot weaponize XRP. So here's the positive. So the positive case, on the other hand, the U.S. may realize that its best shot at deploying a U.S.-based cross-border payment system is actually Ripple. XRP also offers an alternative to the U.S. dollar, which Russia would like to hear that, which is something a lot of global businesses may want to consider, a backup or replacement of the current international payment systems right here. I'm going to put the link to this article so you can go through all the sources. So Russia is fully aware of what XRP is. Now, if you do connect all the dots here, all these other BRIC nations, or these nations applying to become part of BRICS nations, are already partnered with Ripple, as long as it has certain circumstances, as I just talked about, leveling the playing field, that they cannot weaponize it. If they come to these agreements, these nations will use XRP, for sure. And as I stated in previous video, if Russia creates its own blockchain, they can still do that. But as I stated before, it's about interoperability. There's going to be other nations that are probably not going to want to. They're going to have their own stable coin and all that. This is where XRP comes in. And believe me when I say that there's a lot more going on than what they're telling us. There's a lot of talks going on behind the scenes. Now, here's a great article from Global Times. More countries are knocking on BRICS' door, a sign that the world needs a fairer governance than the West-dominated one. This is a pretty long article, but I'm just going to go over this part right here. So what BRICS is against are power politics, hegemony, the law of the jungle, all of which basically determines that in international politics, only major powers have say, and small countries must be obedient or even be exploited. Against this backdrop, BRICS calls for fairness and justice, a global governance in which developing countries have their due status and their voices can be heard. The BRICS just want to bring a balance in the current global order. So, when the West compares BRICS with G7 and NATO, it has turned a blind eye to the fact that G7 has long become a rich countries club, and NATO's mentality is still trapped in the Cold War era. Whenever G7 attempts to put up a show to discuss various global issues nowadays, all it really cares about is containment of China and Russia. But BRICS advocates a win-win for the entire world. This is a win not just for developing countries, but also for developed powers. This is the biggest difference between BRICS and Western blocs. The bottom line is they're going to have to come to an agreement. They have to come to an agreement. Thing that I hate to say it's a little startling is that usually when we come to crossroads like this, it usually ends up in some types of big wars. Now continuing, now I want to play you this video from SABC News and to talk about BRICS nations, the new monetary system, the collapse of the petrodollar, and more.
Well, analysts continue to speculate on the implications of an international reserve currency planned by Russia and China amid fears that the US might be facing a recession. Now, the announcement of a reserve currency was made by Russian President Vladimir Putin during the BRICS summit in June. Meanwhile, former US President Donald Trump warns of a depression if the US economy continues on the slow growth path. Associate Professor of African Politics at UNISA, Professor Everesto Benyera, as well as Regin Kosi, who is the Executive Director and the Head of Research on Macroeconomics, Money and Banking at First Source Money, join us for a discussion. Great to have both of you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, Reg, let me begin with you. I mean, we speak about a reserve currency as if everybody knows what a reserve currency actually is. So perhaps let's start with the basics here. What exactly is a reserve currency, and why should societies bother with what actually happens in the space when they have this kind of thing?
Yeah, a reserve currency is that dominant currency in which transactions, economic transactions, are mostly used in a region, in a continent, globally. So in this case, we have the US dollar as the preeminent reserve currency. This does not necessarily mean the US dollar itself is the reserve currency. The euro is to some extent, and Japanese yen, but preeminently the US dollar is that currency which international economic transactions are conducted in. So it becomes a vital cog in international economic governance. Hence, such an important issue as currency reserves being now suggested by the BRICS.
Okay, so we look at that and the dollar is the dominant reserve currency. I mean, in a nutshell, that's pretty much so what it is. But we've got Russia saying, hang on a second, this should not be the case. We should look at our own reserve currency as discussed at BRICS. Is that in basics what the Russian president is suggesting?
Absolutely. That's exactly what the president is suggesting, is because the U.S. is abusing that dominance it has for its currency. So we have what they call the exorbitant privilege that the U.S. has for its currency, being the one that's being used globally. So the U.S. is using that as a tool, as a weapon to whip all those that do not comply with whatever it wants them to comply with.
And when we look at the state of the US at the moment, and we talk about the US economy, and perhaps, Prof, you want to come in and also weigh in on this. With having the US as a reserve currency and, you know, the threats and the talk of a recession and then a depression, and having the US currency as that reserve, what implications are there? Let's talk about that now.
Leanne and the viewers, good morning, and thanks, Rach, for laying that foundation. Let me politicize a bit or put it in football terms as it were. A reserve currency underwrites state sovereignty. So there is usually a link between failed states and a currency. You tend to find states that are failed having no currency at all. So this is why there is so much talk, so much attention, and so much hype about this reserve currency, because there is a direct link between state sovereignty and a currency. In this case, the sovereignty of the global south, underwritten by the BRICS countries. Secondly, Leanne, we are witnessing a new international financial order in the making. Whether we like it or not, there is a new financial order that is being developed as an alternative to the dollar-euro dominated international financial order, mainly because of what Reggie said, which is the abuse of the current system by the United States and its allies. Thirdly, allow me to observe that you cannot separate money from war. The two are interlinked, because the most profitable business in the world is a war. There is no war in history that has made a loss. This is why Cicero said, money is the soul of the war. So if all wars are profitable, then we can trace the rise of not only reserve currencies, but currencies themselves to war. When the Massachusetts Bay Colony printed the first banknotes in the United States way back in 1690, it was to fund its military operations. Again, in 1914, when the First World War, the so-called First World War ended, that is when we saw the rise of the United States dollar as the global reserve currency, courtesy of the meeting that occurred at the Bretton Woods institutions. So we see a direct link between war and currencies. So what are the implications for the United States if I now go back to your question? Firstly, there is going to be inflation at home. Inflation is going to visit the United States of America. Secondly, the United States is now going to fight in many fronts, because remember, there is already a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies as an alternative to the US dollar hegemony. So now it is going to be fighting on two fronts. Thirdly, the de-dollarization, this process that is happening, will expose the reality that the gold that is presumed to be in Fort Knox is not there. And finally, the US veto at the IMF and the World Bank will become obsolete.
All right. So it's so interesting, because I want to I think we need to take a little bit of a history lesson here as well to find out how, in fact, the US dollar became this reserve currency. Because, I mean, if we go back, like you say, war, it brings about these things. But, I mean, if we go back to 1971, the world left the gold standard, and that was basically where it was. Gold was that reserve currency, and the US announced that they're no longer going to be converting dollars to gold. So the question is, why was the gold standard abandoned, and how did the US dollar become this almighty reserve currency? Who determined that? And at the same time, how do we determine that the US currency will no longer be the reserve currency? Because it has been for a long time, but how do we stop that from happening?
Is that for me?
Go for it, Rich. Jump in. Yes. Apologies. You go for it.
Thank you very much. Just a bit of correction there. What happened in 1971 was that the Bretton Woods system got abolished. The Bretton Woods system was such that the dollar itself was pegged to the gold, and the rest of the currencies were therefore fixed or pegged to the US dollar. And the US dollar began to be a currency of reserve as early as 1940s. Actually, the Bretton Woods institutions when they were being formed around 1940s, 1945. That's when the UK British pound lost its reserve currency status towards the US. And therefore, the US emerged as one such currency because of the economy was quite strong and it was sponsoring much of the development in the EU as we speak now. So yes, it emerged therefore as such a currency. And in 1971, the demand for gold by France from the US became clear that the Fort Knox, as my colleague puts it, had no gold at all that would be given to each country that would demand it. Therefore, the President Nixon, abandoned the gold standard backing, and all currencies became fiat.
Yeah.
Now, going forward, therefore, given the dominance, therefore, of this dollar status, and countries are emerging, in fact, started around 2009, when President Dmitry Medvedev of the Russian Federation suggested that since the crisis of 2007-2008, the US was becoming the very unreliable partner in global affairs. Therefore, there's need for us to begin to explore ways in which we could have a new financial order. It began then.
Yeah.
And then today, BRICS is moving pretty fast to ensure that it has a reserve currency which is dependable, which is not subject to the whims of one country, and therefore, here the BRICS are coming up with this new system.
Okay, so let's kind of dumb it down again even more. I want to know who actually decides on something like this, because so you've got the US. This is the reserve currency. I mean, when we see it, I mean, Prof, you spoke about a failed state, and you know the dollar automatically comes in. I mean, we look at something like our neighboring country, Zimbabwe. I mean, this is what happens. This comes in, but who makes the decision that the dollar won't be that currency anymore? Because there are so many complexities in geopolitics. I mean, at the moment, when we look at war with the Europe and the Ukraine, I mean, all of these things that are going on there in Russia, we now see this visit that's taking place, we see Nancy Pelosi from US moving and going and visiting Taiwan, and there are massive tensions now between the US and China. So there's definitely a big global shift taking place. So who decides what this new currency is going to be, what the implications are for a new global reserve currency, and can we rely on an economy like Russia, for instance? Because Russia, with all of these sanctions against it, yes, of course, they are holding up very well, but when we look into the future, are they still going to hold up very well? Let's perhaps look at that. Prof, do you want to talk politics, currencies, and who determines what that next reserve currency is?
In simple terms, Leanne, who determines what then becomes the global reserve currency is the strongest among us. So again, we are back to the issue of war and the military. And if we may link it to Africa, there are very strong arguments that the main reason why the Colonel brother leader Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated was because he was championing the use of the gold standard or the gold coin as a central currency for African countries. But that is a debate for another day. You asked a very important question, who determines and how do they determine it? I think there is something that is called leadership. When leaders decide to abandon one paradigm and shift to another, it then causes seismic shifts. For now, we see that China, India, Iran, and Turkey, among themselves, they are already trading in their currencies. What does this mean? That they are sidelining the United States dollar, just these 4 countries. It means that at present, the global market is excluding 3 billion people from the US dollar-dominated international system. Over 3 billion people no longer need to use the United States dollar to trade with one another. This is just a fraction of the global south. I am just talking about 4 economies here. So as more countries continue to move away from the petrodollar system, from the US euro dominancy, which uses the US dollar as the payment for oil, we expect massive inflationary pressures to strike the United States economy. But the most important thing, Leanne, is that the United States is not going to take this lying down. Of course, the United Kingdom did it when the pound sterling was usurped by the United States dollar. But I don't think that the United States will simply sit and watch and see the United States dollar being rendered a worthless currency like the Zimbabwean dollar. So we are most likely going to see a fight back. Now, going back to the theme of war, Ukraine is receiving aid from all over the West. Right now, at the last check, I think they received 60 billion. How are they going to pay back that money? This is where the issue of resources comes in. Remember how the United States became rich after the war. It is because all the European countries now had to pay back the money that the United States had used to finance the war. And this is how the United States became a very strong economy. There are innuendos that the maneuvers that are happening in Taiwan are to provoke China into a type of Russian reaction so that the United States can gauge how far China is willing to go. Remember, we have never seen an angry China. China is always calm and collected, and it has not flexed its muscle, so to speak. So we are in really for a long ride.
We really are in for a long ride. And the sad thing is that there's good people in all these different countries that don't want war. They want peace. I'm an American. I'm a patriot. I love my country, but I don't like how it's being run. I don't like how the financial system is manipulated. And I will say that. I'm not afraid to say it. Now I want to rewind back to a part where he said that the U.S. is facing two fronts now with the technology of blockchain. I thought that was an interesting point what this man said. I'm going to play it again.
Secondly, the United States is now going to fight in many fronts because remember, there is already a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies as an alternative to the US dollar hegemony.
So, boom, right there, how he's talking about how the United States is going to be fighting different fronts, including blockchain technology. And what are we witnessing right now? Who's the SEC going after? Ripple. It's literally an internal war going on inside our own country. It's crazy. It all has to do or deal with the reins of the financial system. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that video down below so you can watch it. Well, everyone, I hope you did enjoy the video. Go ahead and put your thoughts and comments down below. What are your thoughts about the BRICS nations? What are your thoughts about a basket of world currencies? What are your thoughts about XRP possibly being at a stable price? Go ahead and put all your thoughts and comments down below. Share with friends and family. Get them on board the wealth transfer, the wealth train. And I want to say thank you everyone for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching Token Topics. You all stay safe out there.